Hello and welcome to When Sasquatch Attacks. I hope all of you had a great new year, and I can't wait for what is to come this year. Before getting into this, I wanted to alert you all to a special announcement at the end of this video where I tell you how you can directly participate in a future upload. I know many of you who are familiar with my content will see the title of this video and you may be left a little confused, especially when factoring in that I normally refrain from making content specifically about Bigfoot. As I've stated many times, the reason behind this is due to there being so much information about the topic, I have nothing new to add that hasn't already been said. That is, until today. Today's topic took me by surprise, as it was something I had never heard of, and dare I say, one instance, had me thinking it was something totally different. So without further ado, let's look into this topic that shocked me. Almost exactly 2 years ago, I made a video about the legend of Boggy Creek, in which I laid the defense for the Bigfoot in that story not being as aggressive as originally said to be. I still believe this to be true, but one of my points were that Bigfoot were not normally known to be violent unless provoked. Now, I have been aware of stories of the creature throwing rocks and sticks, but I don't consider that activity to be overtly aggressive. However, thanks to a viewer of mine that goes by the name Rocky2 Piper, my eyes have been opened a bit more. It was suggested that I look into a creature known as the Genoskwa stone giants, and at first, I must admit, I was excited by the topic due to thinking it was literally about a cryptid made of stone, and I have been looking for more topics that I can tie in with the beings known as golems. After looking into it, I found out I couldn't have been more mistaken, but at the same time, more excited about a topic. As stated previously, Sasquatch are generally peaceful beings that do everything in their power to avoid being detected by human beings. This is especially advantageous to them if they choose to remain hidden, or as some people jokingly say, the reigning hide-and-seek champions of the world. Apparently, throughout their early history, a few didn't keep this same mindset and chose to be very aggressive towards adventurers and native people. Our first reports are found in the Native American lore of the Tuscarora tribe, who lived predominantly in North Carolina, but could and can still be found in New York and Ontario. According to their lore from the 1800s, a group of Sasquatch known as the Genoskwa stone giants frequently made raids on their camp. Natively, they were given the name Otniara, which literally means stonish giant. These beings stood at an immense 9 to 11 feet tall and were surmised to weigh over 800 to 1,000 pounds. They were said to be much larger and stockier than the normal Bigfoot, which was commonly written about. These stone giants received their name since their pelt was so hard that arrows couldn't pierce it. Many have assumed that these Sasquatch would roll around in the mud, and when it hardened it made a rock-like appearance, solely with the purpose of armor against Native American weapons. A very small amount of people hypothesize that they actually wore armor, or were made of stone. If the stories are to be believed, I agree more with the mud theory. Frequently, these beings were known to toss rocks at people, but that wasn't the worst of it. These Sasquatch would raid campsites and steal away men, women, and children. They would then eat those people once safely away and hidden in the forests. In some cases, the creatures were known to twist a man's head off in order to decapitate them. It is said that those who didn't suffer the fates previously described were brought back to the Genoskwa lands and eaten alive in one large feast. In a familiar account, the one characteristic that stood out from these stone-clad creatures was the noxious odor that was produced from their armpits. It was described as smelling like a mix between skunk and a dead animal. The smell could remain in a camp that had been raided for many days afterwards. Many people have pointed out that modern-day gorillas utilize the same scent method as a way of communication. However, I can't help but take note that many Bigfoot claimed to be seen today have the description of having a strong skunk-like musk about them, hence giving them the name skunk apes. Moving ahead a few years to 1890, a few brief writings from President Theodore Roosevelt in his book The Wilderness Hunter describe something eerily familiar. In his writings, he noted that many of the urban myths and superstitions are not held by most mountaineers due to being more concerned about common deadly creatures. Yet, he was told of a story from an old grizzled mountain hunter by the name of Bauman. In his retellings of the events, many times he was noted to become unsettled by parts of the story, but he described a large creature with elven features and a skunk-like odor that killed his one friend during a hunt. While trapping along the Wisdom River in Montana, the two men returned to their camp to find it destroyed, but decided to rebuild it anyway. During the night, the strange beast once again returned, only to be scared away when Bauman took a shot at it with his rifle. The next morning, the men split up, with Bauman's friend going on ahead to set up another camp. The old mountain man packed up the old camp and finally managed to meet up with his friend, only to find something terrible. Once he arrived, he saw the creature attacking his friend. The creature snapped Bauman's friend's head back with its front limbs, breaking the man's neck, and then it sunk its fangs into his throat. It is mentioned that the creature did not eat the body, but chose to toss it around and roll it over and over, almost with glee, before disappearing with the body into the dense forest. I know you may be thinking, that doesn't tell much, but the head snapping was very similar to the tactics used by the Genoskwa. Not to mention the actions it used after the body was dead sounds very much like how a primate would act. However, the elven features seem out of place. Until we consider our next odd report. In the summer of 1924, 5 prospectors by the name of John Peterson, Gabe Lefevre, Fred Beck, Marion Smith, and his son Roy Smith were working on a claim near Mount St. Helens in Skamania County of the state of Washington. While walking near the Lewis River, they came across strange footprints in the mud that were human-like, but over 14 inches long. Not long after this, the men started hearing strange noises coming from the tree line and couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was at this point that they claimed to have seen what they described as 7-foot-tall gorilla-like beings, covered in black fur and with pointed ears that stood 4 inches above their head, moving around the forests. I'm going to pause here for a moment, since the description of the ears are an oddity for Bigfoot, but it does sound oddly familiar to what many people think elven features mean. During the trek, the men started to become more and more uneasy with their onlookers, and took a shot at one of the creatures. It staggered a little bit, but seemed to become more determined with the intruders. The following morning on July 10th, Fred Beck woke to find one of the beings standing near a cliff, and he took a shot at it. Apparently he managed to hit it as it staggered around a bit and then fell off the cliff to its death 400 feet down. Later that night, while sleeping in their cabin, the men suddenly heard pounding on the roof and felt the cabin begin to shake. Rocks could be heard bouncing off of their camp, and a few flew through the windows, with one even knocking back unconscious. The men claimed that there were at least a dozen of the same creatures they had seen the previous day outside their cabin assaulting them. The prospectors kept firing their guns at the beings and even through the roof in an attempt to stave off the attack. Reportedly, this event went on all night until daybreak, when they were finally able to make a break for it, leaving everything behind. Many have claimed this story was a tall tale, due to Fred Beck getting parts of the story wrong in later tellings once he was older. However, he could have just become forgetful in his old age. He did state that the cabin burned down in 1968, and whatever remained was destroyed in the 1980s eruption of Mount St. Helens. To this day, people still make treks out in what is now known as Ape Canyon, hoping to find some remnants of the cabin. The story does not end here, though. In May of 1950, a mountaineer and skier by the name of Jim Carter was on a climbing expedition with 20 other people when suddenly and inexplicably, he vanished without trace. Bob Lee of the Seattle Mountain Search and Rescue Unit showed up to try to find the missing man, but found something incredibly odd. He found tracks that he assumed was Carter's running erratically down paths, jumping over crevices, and just giving off the appearance that the man was being chased by something. Bob himself claimed that while out looking for Jim, he couldn't shake the feeling of something watching him the whole time. To this day, Mr. Carter's disappearance is unsolved, but Bob claimed he held firmly that he probably had been attacked by the same creatures Fred Baker had seen many years prior. I would love to hear your viewpoint on these topics, especially in relation as to why they are so angry and as to where many of them went. I also want to mention that in looking into this topic, I found so many more recent reports that it certainly will have a part 2, especially since I found one answering the age-old question of why there isn't ever a Sasquatch body found. Stay tuned, as I think it will continue next week. Before ending this video, I have a special request that I plan to use for a future video. Frequently, I've seen many comments asking me questions about certain cryptids or the like, or simply requesting more information about a topic. I love these types of interactions, but I recently thought it would be interesting to make a video about those questions where I can answer them in almost a Q&A segment. So, if you have a burning question that you would like answered in video form, post it on this comment section or via my social media with a #AskBen before it. I think this can become something quite fun as long as I get enough suggestions. So hit me with your most burning questions. I'm ready for them. I think. I hope. If you haven't yet done so, please consider subscribing to my channel for similar content to this, and I would greatly appreciate it if you could share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!